So Sam, you've given us permission to be successful in the last episode, whatever successful looks like for you. But I'd say for many of us, most of us, some degree of financial stability goes a heck of a long way to creating that thing that we see as success. It's like the saying I heard once that I like. It's money can't buy you happiness, but it's much nicer to cry in a Mercedes than it is to cry on a bicycle. and in that first episode on why we're doing this podcast, we did touch a bit on money and the psychology of money. But how are we going to approach this? Because today we're getting into the weeds a little bit. Welcome back to the Veterinary Business Accelerator, the podcast for vet practice owners who want more time, more profit, and a business that doesn't run their life. Your guide is Dr. Sam Bowden, veterinarian, author, and founder of the Accelerate Practice Academy, where he's helped over 500 practice owners transform their clinics into what he calls abundant practices. I'm Dr. Hubert Hemstra, veterinarian, former practice owner, and host of the VetVault podcast. In this episode, we talk money, why you're not earning what you should be earning, how hidden mindset blocks could be holding you back, and what to do about it. Sam reveals the subconscious brakes that cap your income, and more importantly, how to take your foot off that brake and hit that accelerator towards greater profitability and freedom.
Yeah, I want to really address why you're currently making the amount of money you do in your veterinary practice. I get really specific and get into what's the psychology that sits behind it, and then we'll talk about strategy of if you want to go correct this, what you actually need to do in your practice.
And I'm assuming if somebody's listening to this one, if they clicked play on this one, they're like, it's not quite enough. The money, nobody's listening to this going, why do I make so much money? I feel so guilty.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that. And money, I love talking about money. I find it a fascinating scenario because if we frame it up, and I ask rooms and I say, give me a definition of money. What does money mean to you? And I get a list of different things like, it's freedom and it's options and it's security and it's happiness and all these sort of different things. And I go, yeah, that's true. And I was like, well, what is actual money? And when we have a look at it and really look at the definition, it's just an exchange of value. We used to exchange, you had a pig and it was a very good organically raised pig, and I've got some bananas here. Now, I've got more bananas than I want, and you're sort of sick of eating pork, so we kind of want to do a bit of a swapsy. We're like, well, what's our agreed exchange of value? How many bananas is a pig worth? And when you take a look at back and go historically, the first money was actually created in China about 3,500 years ago. And actually, it was a cowrie shell. It was the first currency that was actually used. So when you look at it, money is just an exchange of value. There's so much baggage we bring to the table, and it is all basically summed up in this. If money is an exchange of value, the amount of money you make is based on the amount of perceived value you feel you bring. I'll say that again. The amount of money you make is based on your perceived or your perception of the value that you bring. And that's it. But we'll unpack that a little bit further because there's a lot that sits under that.
Yeah, there is a lot that sits under that. So can I interrupt for a second there, Sam? So when we talk about how much money you make, because when you say those sentences, I immediately jump to how much I charge. And that's not the only lever for how much you make to some extent. But that's definitely the psychological stumbling blocks as to how much is this thing that I'm going to tell this client I'm going to charge them to do this procedure? How much is it worth? What's the value of it? That's immediately my stumbling block. Is that mainly what we're talking about, or is it broader?
No, it is broader than that, but I think a lot of people get stuck there. So we'll unpack that one as well. Okay. When we look at how much money that you make, there's so many different ways you can make money. We talk about the different sciences. So I talk about number one is technical science, which you learn to become a vet. That's a skill. The second thing is what I call business science, and it's the science of learning how to make money out of your technical skills. And then the third science is what we talk about is wealth science. How do you make passive income out of the money you've made out of your business so you never need to work again? There's so many different ways that you can actually make money. A business is such a cracking vehicle because it's such great personal development, but also it's incredibly leverageable and you have so much control over the amount of money that you make. Whereas in investments, if you want to look stock market and things like that, there's elements that are completely outside of your control, and the majority of them are outside of your control. You're really just putting some money in and you've done your research and you hope you back the right horse. Whereas your practice, you're breeding the horse, you're training the horse, you're feeding it, you decide who the jockeys are, you pick the race you want to go in. You've got so much control over it that it really stacks the odds in your favour. And most really wealthy people have made all their money in business and then they solidify it in investing. But we're just going to talk about business today, of course, vet practice.
Okay.
So let's kick this up. When we go, why are you currently making the amount of money you do in your vet practice? Here's the simple one-line answer, because that's what your subconscious has decided. And I'm going to use a metaphor of a car here. Most people, if you go and ask, would you like to make some more money? They'll say, yeah, of course. That's quite important. They want to make some more money. Say why, and then why will give you the drivers. I want more holidays. I want to trade that for some time, so I've got more time with family and friends, or I want to go on better surf trips. Then we have a look and we go, well, why aren't you making that money already that you want to make? And there's only two reasons. One, you don't know how to, so you haven't learned strategy. Or two, you haven't actually got the mindset to support it. And it's kind of like a car where you can have, I want to make some more money, that's the accelerator, but your subconscious going, yeah, not for you, because money's an exchange of value, and subconsciously there will be anchors, what we call C anchors, or kind of hooks, that stops you actually making the money you want because, hey, not for you. You're not at that level. That's a brake. So the name of the game, if you want to look at why you're making the sort of money you do, your subconscious tends to be in control here. So that's why we dig down that a little bit. We're going to get listeners to do a little bit of work themselves to identify some of these hooks. And here's the fascinating thing about these hooks. Because they're subconscious, you're probably not aware of them because they're so normal. They've been there so long, you get so used to them, you just think that's the way stuff is. And this is where it can really help to have someone else start, pulling the threads to understand, why do I do what I do? And, it almost needs like a process to actually allow you to start pulling those threads, to identify what are some of these anchors or hooks that are holding you back from the accelerator working. You're revving really hard. And what does this often look like in a business? It looks like a car revving really, really hard and going nowhere. So the revs are there, we've got the accelerator there, but we're just not going anywhere. And what happens to a car if you do that? It burns out. Like you go red for a while, blows up the engine. So it's exactly the same process. The goal is to take the foot off the brake. So when we have that mindset in the strategy, you can see ridiculous turnarounds. And I'll share a little case study of a guy that we worked with quite some time ago that was probably one of the more dramatic scenarios I've seen. We'll talk about that shortly.
Okay. I want to check with you, Sam. So there's two. There's the accelerator and the brake. So is the accelerator, is that purely just a decision and clarity about how much money? Or is that strategy? How do we put more foot on the accelerator, being clear about how much, I want to make more money, B, how much do I want to make, be clear on that, and then strategize, like that part of the equation. How do we do that?
Yeah, so the accelerator is the desire to make some more money. It will be more profitable. And coupled to that is, you're going to need to have the strategy. So it's like, I'm going to make more money when it gets to, and it's non-negotiable. The next question is, well, how? And that's when you've gone from mindset to strategy. You understand, okay, what are the processes, what are the systems that allow me to make more money? And it's not necessarily charging more. It might be, depending on how you're charging, but it might be being more efficient. It might be actually that you're inefficient in how you run your business. You might be inefficient in how we're seeing clients, and maybe we can produce more revenue with less vets and things like that. We're like a thermostat. We have what's called a financial thermostat, and we have what's called an upper and a lower limit. Now, we have these upper and lower limits in all areas of life. So, and it's how much we believe we are worth or deserve or will get. So you can have an upper and lower limit in your health, what you believe is what's the healthiest you could be. And there's a certain level of, I'm never going below there. There's a certain amount of love. This is how much love I can get. And then there's a certain level, and I'll never get less than this. Likewise with finances, we have an upper limit of, and really that is, this is how much I believe I'm worth. And it's a subconscious driver. And the bottom level is, there's no way in hell that I'm ever going below this. Or if I do, I'll come back to that. So classic example, wealthy people, GFC, billionaires lost all their money. It was something like within 12 months, they had it all back and some, because that's just that's their kind of lower limit. So when you can actually identify what your upper and lower limits are, it'll help you understand where you're at and why you're getting the results you do. Typically, people that have had a kind of a similar upper limit you'll see they'll sort of bumble along and go a bit up one year and a bit down the next year, and or they might be increasing incrementally, but you never get this exponential increase in how much money they make because they've got a subconscious sabotage sitting there. And if they start making more money, what'll happen? They'll do something to actually bring it down. It's subconscious. They're not planning it. It's sort of just mapped out. So when you understand that we've got an upper and lower, and here's how you can test what your upper limit is. If I said to you, right, and what I do is in a room. So imagine you're in a room, there's a couple hundred people in a room. I go, right, everyone stand up. And what I want you to do, I'm just going to start at, and we'll talk about how much a practice owner would make. And let's say we start at, $100,000, and I'll keep going up by 50 grand increments. And I say, I want you to sit down when you get to the point that you start questioning whether you could make that amount of money. So it's not how much money you want to make. It's like, how much money do you believe you can bring to the market? And typically what will happen is you go higher and higher, and you'll see people, they'll start going, and you can almost see their faces start sort of pinching up, and they're like, ooh, they start feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And that's kind of your upper threshold. And what it is your belief of, I don't think I could make more money than that. I don't think I'd have it.
So to clarify that, so that's not a want to, as in if you said to me, Sam, how would you feel if you were making 20 million a year? Very comfortable. Do I think I can do it? Nah, I can't see how. So is that what we're talking about? It's that.
And that's the accelerator versus the brake. So the brake is that feeling, and when I say you'll start feeling it, it's not in your head, it's a gut, it's a deeper thing because it's so entrenched in your system. And you'll feel it. I call it the factor. You get to a certain, you go, I feel a bit uncomfortable. Because likewise in a consult room, we have exactly the same thing. We have a certain upper threshold. When you start talking about certain money at a certain price level in the consult, you start going, and you feel it. You can feel a little tightness in your stomach. You might slump your shoulders. You get a bit tight in the neck and slump the shoulders. Breathing shortens up a bit. It's physiological because your subconscious going, hey, pay attention, not you, bozo. You can't go that much. You're not worth it.
I get what you say because I get all of those things in consult when I talk money, when it's bigger amounts. But I feel like I can trace very directly where those feelings come from for me. And that's to do with how much did my dad want to spend on dogs. I qualified in South Africa in a university where everything was, we tried to do things, I was literally trained to save money. So I've got heaps of excuses of why in the consult. And again, it's my own budget. So I think I have empathy with people. If I go to the mechanic and they say you're going to spend $1,000 on your car, I'll be like, oh, that sucks, but I'm okay. If the mechanic says gearbox is stuffed, you're going to spend $5,000, that hurts. So I put that onto my clients. I'm like, well, you look a bit like me. You don't look like you're super flash. So I can imagine that $5,000 is going to really hurt. So I don't like so that I get. But when it comes to earning, as to how much money I believe I can earn, how do we identify those breaks? How do we get clear on?
They're actually the same thing. So what you're identifying, you're extrapolating, you're superimposing yourself on someone else and going, they've obviously got the same values, way I was brought up, mindsets were imprinted on me that I did, which of course is not true. And the easiest way to sort of detach yourself from that is, so you are, and it comes from one of my great mentors, who's in the real estate industry actually, he said, you're responsible to people, not for them. So you're responsible to do your job. You're not responsible for their financial situation. You didn't decide whether they went to uni or not, where they grew up, how much whether they drank it and smoked it or gambled it, or whether they decided to go and invest in developing their own mindset. You had no control over that. So how dare you take a position on where they're at financially and take responsibility for that, which is what we as vets do. We take the shoulder bag of like, they can't afford it, therefore I'm going to be responsible for their decisions in life and I'm going to make it my problem. You do that for long enough and you probably get spat out of the vet industry because you're burnt out and you find going to work very tough. So there's this enculturation thing that goes on as you're growing up. I'll give you an example of this, how subtle it can be and how it can catch you up. There's a business we work with and they were doing good revenue. This is a long time ago, but let's say it was about 3 mil, 4 mil revenue per year. And technically very good practice. But the business wasn't making any money at all. I mean, zero profit. And whenever you see these kind of scenarios, when you see that it's a really good practice from standards of care and the building they had and, the technical skills and everyone's up trained, So they're really good at what they do. They're good at technical science, but there's no business science. So I went, to grow a business to that size, the only way you get there is you've got a desire to get there. And often with guys, it's I'm trying to prove something to someone. And normally it's our dad. So what we're doing is I looked at this guy and I went, there's a hook, something that's happened here, because this guy hasn't had a holiday in years. He works 70 hours a week. And I was like, right. So we started pulling threads. And when pulling threads can get quite confronting, what we identified was that this person had a very, very early on in their life, they had some challenges in conversation that sort of came out, like they'd stutter every now and then. And essentially they were talking to the dean of the university, and this person said, this is before he got into vet. The dad said, oh, my son wants to do vet, but he could never be a vet. He couldn't talk at a consult room because he got this stutter. And that was the kind of hook. And so what had happened, this guy had been trying to prove that he could do it, even though his dear dad had passed. He'd been trying to prove himself to his dad ever since, which is proving to his own psyche that, hey, I can do this. All that had to happen is we had to go back and question that and go, well, what was the reality of that situation? Was it actually true? When he identified that that's what he'd been trying to do, was prove himself to his dad, and I'll just make it bigger and bigger, but I don't feel I'm worth it. So by releasing that hook, this business went from struggling to, I think they did 15 to 20% net profit within the 6 to 9 months, which they'd never done in 30 years of operation. And suddenly he's booking holidays and all these sort of things. That's how subtle it can be sitting there where we're not even aware of it. And that's the brake. Now, we've all got brakes. I've got a brake. You've got a brake. We all have brakes. It just matters how hard we're putting our foot on the brake.
So, Sam, how do we identify those brakes? Because I feel like lots of them, as you say, will be deep-seated.
Yeah.
Some of them are obvious, and others, you're like, I don't understand where this comes from. Because you can't release them if you can't find them.
Look, to be really honest, how have I done it? I've spent a lot of time with a lot of people helping me. And I was always driven, like scarcity was my driver. And I was like, why have I even got this scarcity mindset that I want to get ahead? I want to have a life on my terms. I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, all those things. But if I'm really honest with you and being vulnerable, I'd say I was driven from a place of scarcity. And it was really funny because we grew up, sheep and cattle station. We went to private schools and boarding school. We certainly weren't sport. We had to learn to work hard pretty early on, but there was no lack in our lives. But obviously what I've done is I've grabbed those things and made perceptions around it. So they say it's never the event that shapes you. It's the meaning you put to the event. And I can remember certain examples of these. I grew up in a sheep and cattle station, right? I can remember that we had this old kerosene fridge. And our kerosene fridge out in the middle of Queensland, Australia, it's 45 degrees in the shade during the day. So a kerosene fridge doesn't get very cold. And obviously we slaughtered our own meat. And I can remember the meat would go green in the fridge because it wouldn't be cold enough to stop it actually going off. And I can remember before you cooked it, you had to scrape the hair off it was growing off it. I can remember eating and tasting basically rotting meat. And I was like, it was so horrible. But what was being wired and seeded into me is like, you don't waste anything. You save everything because you've got to get ahead. And that's a tiny little example of what sort of shaped me that, nowadays I look around and I'm pretty resourceful. I don't waste a lot. And these are the things that are shaping us, even where I could go and, have whatever I want.
How do people normally act, Sam, when you hit that upper limit of your thermostat? Like, how do you recognize what sort of behaviors do people do?
Generally, it always looks like either discomfort or you'll do something stupid. And the game is to realize the discomfort and identify, I'm just bumping against my ceiling here and not avoid it. So classic example, when we bought the house we now live in, it was usable flat acreage. It was way bigger house than we would ever need, still is. And I remember hearing something, if you put yourself in the environment, then you become the environment. And so I remember for the first 6 months feeling really uncomfortable because my subconscious is saying, what are you doing in a joint like this, dude? You're not at this level. You don't deserve this. And I was really acutely aware and I went, I'm just going to see what happens. And over about a 6 to 12 month time, what happened, our income actually jumped up significantly. And what happens is, it's another case of you giving yourself permission. So typically what happens is you'll start actually feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Or you'll do something, you'll make some money, then you'll just go and invest in something and it just goes south. And I've sort of seen this happen again. And people might think, that was just because, it was a bad investment. If it happens a couple of times, you're like, no, it's not a bad investment. It's actually your subconscious trying to keep you in the zone that it feels safe at. Because above it, it's identified that there's these things that could hurt you. Maybe people will reject me. Maybe I'll have no friends. Maybe my family. That's being rejected because of success is a big fear of people. And typically what you might see is someone has a really big year, and then the next year they'll stop doing the stuff that got them there, and they'll back right back.
You mean from a practice owner perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw someone do this. They started making some money and they just went, oh, yeah, making money, but I just don't care about money. And I went, don't do that. And they tanked for the next 12 months. And like I said,
why? How? Like what caused the tank?
They just took their eye off the ball. Wages went up. Suddenly clients kind of dried up. It was just bizarre. But I remember at the moment in time that they went, and they'd made the money and basically said, it's like getting a gift. You go, I really want that gift, but I don't care about the gift anymore. So the universe goes, okay, no gift for you. Whatever you don't appreciate will leave you. If you don't appreciate love and pay attention to it, it'll leave you. If you don't appreciate finances and wealth, it'll leave you. And that's what this person did. Don't do that. Big tip. If you're listening, don't do that. You don't love money, but you appreciate and you understand its value.
Okay. So is that mindset for this one done? Are we at some strategies on how to get that accelerator going?
Well, I think the mindset is kind of an ongoing process that never stops is my message, but it's a start. It's just that people try and get straight to strategies without the mindset, and I've never seen it work. But I think we've had enough of the mindset. I'll actually give you some strategies and talk specifically about vet practice. And if you want to make more money in your vet practice, I'm going to start giving you, and I will just give the 4 levers, the only 4 levers that you can pull.